Waiver wires might feel a little thin this week, but there are still moves that can help you win the next few games. We've got plug-and-play running backs, wide receivers you should be stashing, handcuffs that you don't want to miss, plus quarterback and tight end streamers if you're in a pinch. Let's dive in, starting with the running backs. Of course, we got to start with Michael Carter. He is the priority pickup for this week. He is the guy in the Cardinals backfield. We talked about this last week coming into the week. You need a running back. He's the plug and play. He's not a must start by any means, but now that we know that this coaching staff prefers him as the primary guy and Trey Benson's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, you have someone you can start for that period of time. He did lead the Cardinals in all the categories that we care about, 23 touches. He led the team with 57% of snaps. He also led the backfield with 5 targets on a 49% route participation. He also ran the most routes. Emari Demercado got some run too. Funny enough, he didn't get any targets in this game, but he was the primary passing down back. But as you probably saw, he dropped the football for a touchback on a long would-be touchdown run. His head coach is absolutely bananas too. In a negative game script, Demercado can still be valuable, but Carter is the priority pickup for the week. And I'm willing to spend, 25% of my fab if you really need a running back. And if you're really desperate, maybe more, because running backs don't go in trees. Starting running backs don't go in trees. So if you need to spend a little bit more, I totally get it. Let's talk about this Chargers backfield. Right? Amarian Hampton is going on IR. Absolutely brutal, but now what do you do? Who do we pick up? Hassan, Haskins, or Kimani, Vidal? Haskins was the guy who was giving Hampton breathers here and there before Hampton got hurt, and he was the running back who was on the field right after Hampton left the game, right? So he got the snaps early, before garbage time, and once the game was out of hand, that's when Kimani Vidal came in on early downs. Vidal was playing a passing down role before garbage time, but the early down role was Hassan Haskins, okay? So by that logic, I'm looking at Haskins as the primary guy on early downs. But then I look at the state of this offensive line, number one. It's not good. I look at what this offense will likely do without Hampton, and that's potentially throw the ball even more. They were already a pass-first team. And the guy who'll be the primary pass catcher, that's Kimani Vidal. And Hampton maxed out at 12 carries each of the last 2 games. If you told me that Hassan Haskins was going to get 12 carries in the next few games, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, he'll average 37 yards rushing per game, So you look at what Hampton did in the receiving game now, right? 6 catches, 5 catches, 6 catches each of the last 3 games. Based on how this team might operate, Vidal would probably be the guy I want in my lineup, potentially to rack up some catches. Now, the goal line role probably will be Haskins, but here's the thing. Hampton only has 4 attempts inside the 5-yard line this year, and only 1 of those went for a rushing touchdown. He has 12 red zone carries on the year, 1 touchdown from those red zone carries. So how many is Haskins really going to get over the next 4 games? You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be a lot of Justin Herbert in this passing game, and that's why I'm leaning Vidal. I think both should be rostered. And given all the ambiguity around the situation, I'm not really spending up in terms of fab dollars. Maybe max $15 on Vidal, closer to 12, 13% maybe, but maybe 7 to 8% on Haskins. But that's really about it. And only if you really need a running back, to be honest with you. And then moving on even further, Kendre Miller continues to trend up. He led this backfield in rushing attempts last week, 10 for 41. He had 1 catch for 8 yards, 32% of snaps in week 4, 39% in week 5. Kamara had 72% snap share in week 4, 56% in week 5. Is Kamara going to get traded? I don't know. I think it's worth having Kendre Miller on your bench at the very least right now. Tyler Algier, 16 carries and a touchdown in weeks 2 and week 4 when there was a lot of volume to go around for this offense. When they know they can run the ball, they will run the ball and they'll use both of their running backs. But the real reason why I want him on my bench is because he's the best handcuff in all of football. Probably the best. Bijan Robinson goes down. I'm not going to wood right now. He would be the guy, and he would be pretty damn good with that role. Obviously, Kenneth Gainwell, we saw what happened before the Steelers bye. Is Jalen Warren going to be back this week? We have no idea. My assumption is yes, but we don't want to assume that and leave Kenneth Gainwell on the waiver wire or let someone else in your league get him for super cheap or for free. I'll put him on my bench just in case, because if Warren is out again, Gainwell is close to a must start based on all the opportunity that he got. 31 fantasy points in week 4, 25 touches for 134 yards. He'll be in lineups. Tajay Spears, another one. He could create standalone value alongside Pollard. He's just a stash for now. Kareem Hunt, 2 touchdowns last night. He is the running back to roster in KC, but it's going to be an up and down story. You're banking on a touchdown. You're banking on a very inefficient running back. He was efficient last night, but don't bank on that moving forward. His 2 touchdowns were inside the 5-yard line, so he's the guy who got that work. That is worth noting on a Patrick Mahomes-led offense. Now let's move to wide receivers, okay? We're going to split this up a little bit. The first group here, potential long-term value plus fill-ins, right? So guys you can fill in this week and then potentially have for the rest of the season and get some value out of them, right? Josh Downs is one of them. 6 catches for 54 yards last week on 8 targets. His route participation has gone up each of the last 2 games. Now, they did kind of coincide with Alec Pierce being out, 71% and 72% route participation. We really want that number to stay up and them to continue to run those 3 wide receiver sets. 25% target share this past week. That was higher than any other Colts receiver. That was higher than Pittman, but Pittman ended up catching the score. Alec Pierce, his teammate, weeks 2 and week 3, he went 4 for 68, 4 for 67. He's the deep threat. He could be back from a concussion. We'll see. But I think he should be rostered, and you can plug him and play him. Tyquan Thornton, obviously, continuing to catch deep bombs from Patrick Mahomes. Even when Rashee Rice is back, he can still play that role. I wouldn't expect him to get a really high route participation number, but they're really rotating through these wide receivers. But he had 90 yards last night on 3 catches. He caught a touchdown in the 3 weeks before that. He deserves to be rostered. Troy Franklin, he's the number 2 wide receiver for the Broncos. Tough matchup last week. Should have better matchups moving forward, like this week against the Jets. Courtland Sutton tied up with Sauce Gardner a little bit. Maybe more targets for Troy Franklin. Darnell Mooney, he's the number 2 for the Falcons. The reports were before the bye that he shouldn't have to miss a game with the hamstring injury that he sustained 2 weeks ago, but he's a solid stash at the very least just in case he can't go this week. Romeo Doubs is not available in most leagues, but he is available in a lot of leagues. So check if he's available. Obviously, they just had a bye, so there might not be a lot of attention on the Packers right now. 3-touchdown game before the bye. Great matchup against Cincinnati this week. He has a couple good matchups over the next few weeks, so definitely worth rostering if he's available. Toy Horton, 3 touchdowns now in 5 games. He's maxed out at 4 targets though so far, but he's shown a lot of promise, man. He's a rookie, right? He's a great stash and big fan of Tory Horton. Let's move on to some stashes, guys who I'm not really confident putting in my lineup, but I kind of want them on my bench. Let's start with Isaiah Bond. The Browns are prioritizing their young players, right? They're trying to get Bond going, 19% and 21% target shares over the last 2 weeks. The problem is that Dylan Gabriel gave him a catchable target rate on only 33% of those targets. Isaac Tesla, he worked himself into the rotation a lot more on Sunday. Season high 54% route participation. That's up from 22% in week 4. Not a whole lot of targets in this game, but we've seen the ability this guy has when given opportunity. I think he's worth a stash in deep leagues just to see if that opportunity ends up growing, especially with given the fact that Jameson Williams has been non-existent this entire season so far. What a disappointment. Darius Slayton sustained that hamstring injury. Brutal. He's worth a stash, okay? He was targeted on 20% of his routes when he was on the field last week. Wandale was at 16% for context. So even if Darius Slayton is out this week, I still think he deserves to be on benches. All right, Jalen Coker. I don't know when he'll be back. They are going to designate him to return from IR, but they have 21 days to put him on the active roster, right? So we'll see what happens there, but I think he's worth a stash. I think there's room for a wide receiver to be the number 2 behind Tech McMillan. I think he's a good player, and I think if he's given opportunity, he could potentially have a wide receiver 3 ceiling. And then some random fill-ins for the week. Not necessarily guys you're going to be rostering all season long. Number 1, Kendrick Bourne. Not sure what the availability is looking like for Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings this week, but he went 10 for 142 last Thursday night, right? On 11 targets, 24 fantasy points. Mac Jones and him were just, he was just slinging it to him all game long. If these guys miss, I think, you could do worse than putting him in your lineup. Ryan Flournoy, 6 catches for 114 yards on 9 targets, 31% target share, 38% targets per route run. Why is that number higher? Because he didn't have a full route participation. You know who did have a near full route participation? Jalen Tolbert, 91%, 4% target share. Absolutely brutal right there. So with CeeDee Lamb missing, I'd rather put Flournoy into my lineup after what he showed than Jalen Tolbert. If you guys remember from my Senior Bowl coverage, Ryan Flournoy on my Instagram story, pretty cool. Anyway, he did look good at the Senior Bowl for what it's worth. Had a great first day, and then had some solid day 2 and solid day 3. Anyway, moving on. Quarterback streamers. This is just a couple for this week. A couple brutal matchups overall. But Sam Darnold, he's probably my favorite streamer for this week. Going into Jacksonville, he's playing good football, man. He was forced to pass in this past game. Back and forth between him and Baker Mayfield. It was a really good game to watch. 341 yards and 4 touchdowns. I was wrong on Sam Darnold coming into this year. He's a good quarterback now, man. It wasn't just... Obviously, I think him going to Minnesota helped. O'Connell definitely helped him out a ton with his development. But, he's a good quarterback now, man. Solid matchup this week. It should be a close game. Jaguars just beat the Chiefs last night. Should be a good one. Next up, if he's not available, Tua against the Chargers. If he's available, he now has at least 2 touchdowns in 4 straight games. Don't love this matchup for Tua overall, but I think he can be serviceable. Another guy whose matchup isn't that great is Jackson Dart at home against Philly. It's really about what his legs can do, right? It's really doing all the work for him right now. It makes him a serviceable option this week. 10 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown 2 weeks ago, 7 for 55 rushing last week. All right, a few tight end streamers, but first of all, let's talk about Mason Taylor real quick. Mason Taylor is the guy that I want to pick up this week. He's high on my overall waiver list. If you're having troubles at tight end, I suggest grabbing him. Taylor has 26% target share each of the last 2 games and now has back-to-back 65+ yard games, 75% route participation, at least in each of these games. Looks like the clear number 2 behind Garrett Wilson right now. And if they continue to be down in games, we could see another 12 target game potentially for Mason Taylor. And in terms of streamers, if Taylor is not available, like Taylor could potentially be the guy that you start from here on out. He could be a tight end 1 on the year. We'll see how it works out. A larger sample size would be awesome to really make that determination. But at this point, I think he has the best bet to do it given who's on the waiver wire right now. Another potential streamer this week, Jake Tonjes going up against Tampa Bay. It does not look like Kittle will be back this week. 58 yards and a touchdown in week 4 for Tonjes, 41 yards and a touchdown in week 5. 7 catches, 11 targets last week. It only amounted for 41 yards. But, with these wide receivers banged up, maybe he could come through. Theo Johnson going up against Philly. Theo Johnson, I think, is the better long-term ad than Tonjes. He had a 25% target share in week 4 and then tied the team lead in targets in week 5. And then he caught both of Jackson Dart's touchdowns, obviously. 76% route participation is looking pretty solid. And it looks like Dart is targeting him a little bit more than Russell Wilson was for sure. And then AJ Barner going up against Jacksonville. I wouldn't depend on Barner, and I wouldn't get my hopes up. Despite him catching 4 touchdowns over the last 4 games. But he did catch all of his 7 targets this past week. But before that, 2, 3, 1, 3 targets, okay? Only 59% route participation last week as well. So not something that, is sustainable. Now, before last week, he maxed out at only 14% targets per route run. But hey, he's a favorite in the red zone right now. You can do worse. Harold Fannin going up against Pittsburgh. He caught 4 passes last week, only 13 yards. He did catch his first touchdown of his career from Dylan Gabriel, but his role didn't change that much. David Njoku did run a season high route participation. He had his best game of the year, but Fannin is a streamer if these other guys are not available. Let's talk about running back handcuffs real quick, okay? I know that a lot of you guys are trying to figure out just who to stash overall. These are the guys that I have, and in this order, okay? Tyler Algier, I already mentioned him. Ray Davis. I know Ty Johnson is there, but we have a little bit of a sample size now with Ray Davis that when James Cook misses a game, Ray Davis takes over the running game, and he's on a great offense, so that makes him catapult all the way up to one of the best handcuffs you can roster. Bashal Tutin, big believer in his talent, and I think this run scheme and the way this offensive line is gelling right now would make Bashal Tutin one of the best handcuffs to roster. I know there hasn't been much production at all, but you're really just rostering him for that potential boost in value. Knock on wood, if Travis Etienne were to get hurt, I'm not going to wood on all these guys, okay? Because obviously these handcuffs depend on an injury, right? So we don't want anyone to get hurt. We just have to make sure that we have these guys rostered so that we're not spending an arm and a leg on waivers. Blake Corum, right? He's the next man up if Kyron Williams can't go. I'm a big fan of Jarquez Hunter, but listen, I have to look at what the coaches are doing, who they favor, and we have to go with them. So Blake Corum would be the guy. Brian Robinson Jr., man, if anything were to happen to CMC, knock on wood, then Brian Robinson Jr. would straight up just demolish, just clean up in that backfield. He's a better than average talent, but better than average talent can do wonders in this backfield. Rashad White, as you're seeing right now, literally 80% snap share, not the best rusher ever, but at least he catches a ton of passes and he is the main goal line option on a great offense. RJ Harvey, up and down, right? I thought he might have some standalone value after what we saw in week 4. Week 5 really diminished there, but if anything were to happen to J.K. Dobbins, and by the way, when was the last time J.K. Dobbins finished the season? Knocking on wood, guys. I'm not wishing on anything, but R.J. Harvey should belong on benches, right? Kenny Gainwell, we saw what he did a couple weeks ago. Keaton Mitchell, he would be Derrick Henry's handcuff on early downs, okay? Not Justice Hill. Justice Hill's their passing down back. He would remain in that same role. Similar story to what we just saw, right? Michael Carter wasn't even on the field, yet he came in. Demercado kept his same role, and then he moved into that early down role. It would be a very similar thing with guys like Ray Davis, a very similar thing with someone like Keaton Mitchell, right? Kendra Miller, we talked about him already. Ali Gordon, if anything were to happen to Devon Achane, Ali Gordon would step up and be the guy. Will Jalen Wright end up taking a little bit of work? Maybe, but Gordon has surpassed him at this point. DJ Giddens, I think he's the most underrated handcuff, I would say. If anything were to happen to Jonathan Taylor, Giddens would be the guy I'd clearly pick up. He would be the one that I would want. Very, very talented. I think he's a really underrated player in both the rushing game and the receiving game. We talked about Tajay Spears already. He had a bunch of great games at the end of last year during the fantasy playoffs while Tony Pollard was banged up. And then Kyle Monangai, right? Will he get some work after this bye, right? Sometimes we see a little bit of a rookie bump post-bye. Will he see it? I don't know. It's very possible that they continue to ride DeAndre Swift. But if anything were to happen to Swift, it's looking like Monangai is the next man up with Roshan Johnson barely getting any work so far through a few games. Guys, that's going to do it. We'll be back tomorrow with our running back matchup show. I'll see you then. Take it easy. Peace.